Have you ever tried to escape your house, only to realize the door won't open, while the entire building around you is shaking like it's about to collapse? Imagine hearing air raid sirens in the middle of the night, waking up to explosions somewhere outside your city. At first you think the blast is far away. But then the walls start trembling. The windows rattle. Dust begins falling from the ceiling. And suddenly, you hear something terrifying. A long, falling whistle from the sky. Seconds later. Boom. The entire building shakes violently. That's when I ran to the door to escape, but when I grabbed the handle, it wouldn't open. And in that moment, I realized something horrifying. The missile that exploded had just landed on our street in Amman, Jordan. And I was trapped inside my house. Most nights here are quiet. But lately people have been nervous because of the conflict between Israel and Iran. Missiles have been crossing the region. Still, no one expects war to reach their own street. That night it was 2:13 a.m. when the sirens started screaming across the city. At first I stayed in bed. Because sometimes the alerts are only warnings. But something about that night felt different. Outside my window, the sky kept flashing red. Not lightning. Interceptors. Then I heard a distant explosion. Then another. My heart started beating faster. What would you do if air raid sirens suddenly woke you up in the middle of the night? My phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Take shelter immediately. Before I could even think, I heard a sound that froze the blood in my veins. A long, falling whistle. Like something huge tearing through the sky. People think explosions are the worst part. But the sound before impact, that terrifying whistle, is something you never forget. Then, boom. The explosion shook the entire neighborhood. Windows rattled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. That missile didn't land far away. It landed very close. Have you ever heard an explosion so powerful it made your whole house shake? Before I could even move, another blast echoed somewhere across the city. Then the entire building shook violently. The floor trembled under my feet. The walls creaked loudly. For a moment, I truly thought the building might collapse. My mind went blank. All I could think was one thing. Get out. I rushed to the door and grabbed the handle. But when I tried to open it, it wouldn't move. The lock was jammed. I pulled harder. Still nothing. The building shook again. And that's when fear gripped my chest faster than I ever imagined. Because I suddenly realized, I might die inside my own house. What would you do if the only exit from your house suddenly refused to open? I kept pulling the handle again and again. The door wouldn't move. Outside I could hear people shouting in the street. More explosions echoed in the distance. Sirens screamed across the city. My hands began to shake. My breathing became fast. In that moment, I truly thought my life was about to end. Then suddenly, an idea came to my mind. Something I had almost forgotten. A sledgehammer in my room. If you were trapped like that, would panic take over, or would you search for a way out? I ran into my room. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself forward. The building was still shaking around me. Dust drifted slowly from the ceiling. Another explosion echoed somewhere in the distance. I grabbed the sledgehammer leaning against the wall. It felt heavy in my hands. But at that moment, it felt like my only chance to survive. I rushed back to the door. Hold the hammer tightly. And in my heart, I prayed silently. Have you ever prayed during a moment when you thought you might not survive? I raised the hammer. The hallway light flickered. The building trembled again. I swung with all my strength. Bang! The door cracked slightly but didn't open. My heart pounded wildly. I lifted the hammer again. Bang! The wooden frame splintered. My hands were shaking. But I refused to stop. One more swing. With everything I had left. Bang! The lock finally broke. The door burst open. The relief I felt in that moment was overwhelming. I ran outside. But what I saw next was even more terrifying. Do you think you would have had the strength to keep hitting that door? The street was chaotic. Neighbors were running everywhere. People were shouting. Some were crying. Smoke was rising into the dark sky. Just a few houses away, I could see where the missile had landed. Windows were shattered. Pieces of buildings were scattered across the road. Some people had cuts from broken glass. Others were helping neighbors who were injured. More and more people rushed out of their homes to join us in the street. Then suddenly, the sirens started again. Another warning. Another possible missile. Everyone looked up at the sky. And one terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if the next one lands here? If another missile warning started right then, would you run or freeze? We stood there in the dark street, watching the sky. Waiting. Listening. Hoping the next explosion wouldn't be closer. Because after what just happened, none of us knew if we would survive the rest of the night. War doesn't just happen on battlefields. Sometimes it reaches quiet streets, ordinary homes, and ordinary people trying to survive the night. This is Mr. Shadowpools. And that was one of the most terrifying nights of my life. And just when I thought the worst was over, the sirens started again. Another missile warning. That's when I realized the night in Amman was far from over. Part 2 is on the channel right now.